The vote and the first strike. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called with unusual haste. In the vast ceremonial chamber that orbited the binary star system of Talaxon Prime, representatives from 932 civilizations gathered in their designated atmospheric zones. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, with each section maintaining different gravity levels, air compositions, and temperature ranges to accommodate the diverse biology of its members. Today, however, no one admired the architecture. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ focused on the central platform where Ambassador Drexen of the Valorian Empire stood. Drexen was impressive even by Valorian standards. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, resulting in dense muscle structure and thick armored skin that shimmered like polished obsidian. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, and his forearms gestured with practiced authority as he addressed the assembly. His reputation as a diplomat was impeccable. In his 2 centuries of service, he had negotiated 17 peaceful resolutions to potential conflicts. But today he came not as a peacemaker but as a prosecutor. The holographic display above the platform showed a small yellow star with 8 planets orbiting it. The third planet glowed with a soft blue and green hue, swirled with white atmospheric patterns. It looked unremarkable, one of billions of similar worlds scattered across the galaxy. But this world, Drexen explained, had become a problem that could no longer be ignored. Honored members of the Council, Drexen began, his voice amplified and translated simultaneously into 932 languages. For the past 50 of their years, we have monitored a species that calls itself humanity. They inhabit the planet they named Earth, located in what they call the Sol system. The Council designated this region as a developing civilization zone 43 of their years ago, with strict non-interference protocols in place. He paused, letting the information settle before continuing. Humanity has violated our boundaries 27 times in the past decade. They have established unauthorized colonies on 6 worlds within restricted space. They have extracted resources from asteroid fields claimed by member civilizations. They have sent exploration vessels into quarantine zones without permission or proper decontamination procedures. Each violation has been met with warnings, with diplomatic communications, with clear statements of galactic law. The display changed to show images of human spacecraft. The designs looked crude compared to Council vessels, blocky and inefficient, covered with excessive external components and painted with bizarre symbols and text. Some ships bore names like Resilience, Liberty's Torch, and Undaunted Spirit. The Council members who bothered to read the translations found the names puzzling. Why name a ship after abstract concepts? Representative Quillix of the Methane Collective bubbled a question through her translator. What is their technological classification? Surely they cannot pose a genuine threat to any Council member. Drexen's expression might have been a smile, though the gesture looked menacing on his species. Precisely the point I wish to emphasize. Humanity is classified as a Level 2 civilization. They have achieved basic faster-than-light travel, though their drives are primitive and slow. They possess directed energy weapons, though these are barely more powerful than industrial cutting tools. They have no shield technology, no quantum communication networks, no artificial gravity systems. By every measurable standard, they are at least 300 years behind the least advanced Council member civilization. Then why are we discussing them? Asked Senator Vorheim of the Crystalline Concordat, his faceted body refracting light in patterns that indicated confusion. If they are so primitive, let them play in their corner of space until they mature enough to join civilized society. Because they are expanding, Drexen replied sharply. In just 50 years, they have spread to 31 star systems. They colonize worlds at a rate that should be impossible for their technology level. They extract and process resources with an efficiency that suggests either hidden technology or a work ethic we have never before encountered. And most concerning, they refuse to acknowledge Council authority. Every diplomatic message we send receives the same response. Polite acknowledgement followed by complete disregard for our instructions. The chamber filled with the sounds of 932 species expressing surprise, concern, or indignation. The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. It maintained peace and order across 17 galaxies. No species had ever simply ignored it. High Chancellor Meridax, who presided over the Council from her elevated position at the chamber's apex, raised one elegant hand for silence. Her species, the Luminians, were among the Council's founding members. They were beings of pure energy who had long ago transcended physical form, existing now as coherent light patterns held together by quantum fields. When Meridak spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Ambassador Drexen, what action do you propose? We cannot ignore such blatant disregard for established law, but we also do not rush to war against civilizations that may simply be ignorant of proper protocols." Drexen had prepared for this moment. "I propose a limited military intervention. Not an extermination, High Chancellor. The Council does not commit genocide, but a correction. We send a fleet sufficient to overwhelm their primitive defenses, occupy their colony worlds, and establish a physical presence in their home system. We demonstrate the consequences of ignoring galactic law. Once they understand the reality of Council power, we can begin proper diplomatic integration." Admiral Zorath of the Carillion Warfleet stood from his section. The Carillions were one of only 7 species the Council trusted with military operations. They had evolved as apex predators on a death world where everything was either predator or prey, and they had carried that binary worldview into space. Zorath's scaled hide bore the scars of 43 military campaigns, all successful. "The 7th Fleet can accomplish this task," Zorath announced. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never experienced defeat. "Give me 60 days and I will deliver every human colony to Council authority. 120 days and Earth itself will be under occupation. Their primitive weapons will not even penetrate our shields. This will be less a war and more a police action." The Council debated for 3 more hours. Some representatives expressed concern about using military force against a developing civilization. Others argued that humanity's rapid expansion and refusal to communicate suggested aggressive intent that needed to be countered before it became a real threat. A few, very few, suggested that perhaps the Council should study humanity more carefully before taking action. One of those few was Observer Talenth, a member of the Watchers, an ancient order dedicated to studying and understanding all forms of intelligent life. Talenth rarely attended Council sessions, preferring the quiet work of research to the noise of politics. But something about the human situation had troubled him enough to make the long journey to Talixan Prime. "High Chancellor," Talenth said when recognized to speak, "I have reviewed the available data on humanity. I believe we are making assumptions that may prove dangerous. Has anyone examined their history? Their cultural development? Their psychological profile as a species?" Drexen's irritation was obvious. "Observer Talenth, with respect to your order, we have examined what matters. Their technology, their expansion rate, their military capabilities. These are facts. History and culture are abstractions that have no bearing on the current situation." But Talenth persisted. "I have studied their records. Humanity has been in a state of nearly continuous warfare with itself for their entire recorded history. 10,000 years of conflict. They have survived multiple extinction-level events on their homeworld. They have developed weapons capable of rendering their entire planet uninhabitable, and yet they have chosen not to use them in over 80 years. This suggests a level of restraint and wisdom that contradicts your assessment of them as merely reckless. Or it suggests they are violent by nature," Drexen countered. "Which is exactly why we must act now, before they turn that violence outward in a more organized fashion." The debate continued, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. The Council had existed for 12 millennia based on a simple principle: order must be maintained. Species that refused to follow the rules had to be corrected. When the vote was finally called, 897 members voted in favor of military action. Only 35 opposed. High Chancellor Meridax made the decision official. "Admiral Zorath, you have Council authorization to proceed with Operation Correction. Use minimum necessary force. The goal is compliance, not destruction. Make the humans understand their place in the galactic order." "As you command, High Chancellor," Zorath replied. The 7th Fleet departed 3 days later. It consisted of 47 warships ranging from corvettes to the massive dreadnought Inevitable, which served as Zorath's flagship. The fleet represented a tiny fraction of the Council's total military power, but it was more than sufficient to overwhelm a Level 2 civilization. The ships possessed energy shields that could withstand direct hits from stellar flares, weapons that could crack planets, and propulsion systems that would Bring them to the Sol system in just 16 days. Admiral Zorath stood on the command deck of Inevitable as the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. The yellow star burned in the distance, unremarkable among the billions of similar stars he had seen in his career. Somewhere in this system was Earth, and orbiting Earth were the shipyards and defense platforms that represented humanity's pitiful attempt at protecting their homeworld. Scan the system, Zorath ordered. Locate all human military assets. Prepare targeting solutions. Once we demonstrate our superiority, they will surrender quickly enough. The tactical officer, a young Carillion named Vexith, studied his displays with growing confusion. Admiral, I am detecting unusual readings. The humans have significant activity in the outer system, near the gas giant they call Jupiter. Ignore it, Zorath said dismissively, probably mining operations. Focus on Earth and the inner planets. But Vexith's confusion deepened. Admiral, the signatures suggest military vessels. Hundreds of them. That cannot be correct. Our intelligence indicated humanity possesses no more than 80 military spacecraft total. Recalibrate your sensors, Zorath ordered. There is obviously an error. Before Vexith could respond, the communications officer called out, Admiral, we are receiving a transmission. It is on all frequencies, audio and visual, translated into Carillion and Council standard. On screen, Zorath commanded. The image that appeared showed a human female in a dark blue uniform covered with insignia and decorations. She looked young by human standards, perhaps 40 of their years, with dark skin and eyes that held no fear whatsoever. Behind her, the command deck of her ship bustled with activity. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Force, the human said. You have entered Sol system space with an armed fleet and hostile intent. You have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and explain your presence, or you will be fired upon. Zorath laughed, a sound like grinding metal. The audacity of this primitive creature amused him. Human Admiral, I am Admiral Zorath of the Carillion Warfleet, acting under authorization of the Galactic Council. Your species has violated Galactic Law 27 times. We are here to correct your behavior and bring you under proper supervision. You will stand down your forces and prepare for occupation. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Admiral Chen's expression did not change. The Galactic Council has no authority in Sol system. You have 30 seconds remaining. Zorath's amusement vanished. He had offered mercy and been refused. Very well. Tactical. Target the human vessels nearest to us. Destroy 3 of them. That should demonstrate our seriousness. But before the weapons could fire, Vexith shouted a warning. Admiral, massive energy signatures appearing throughout the system. Hundreds of contacts, thousands of contacts. They were hidden, somehow masked from our sensors. The tactical display lit up like a star going nova. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, from within the rings of Saturn, from the dark side of moons, from positions that should have been impossible to hide in. Each ship was small compared to Inevitable, but there were so many of them. And every single one was launching weapons. The first impact struck Inevitable's shields, and Zorath felt the deck shudder beneath his feet. That should not have been possible. Human weapons were primitive, barely capable of scratching Council shielding, but the shields flickered and dimmed under the sustained barrage. Evasive action, Zorath commanded. Return fire! All ships combat formation! But the 7th Fleet had been designed for battles in open space. Capital ships trading massive energy blasts at great distances. This was something else entirely. The human ships moved like insects swarming, attacking from dozens of angles simultaneously. They used tactics no Council military academy taught because no civilized species fought this way. They rammed shields with unmanned drones packed with nuclear weapons. They fired projectiles that moved too slowly to track properly, but hit with devastating kinetic force. They deployed clouds of reflective chaff that scattered targeting lasers and sensors. And they talked. Constant communication between ships. Coordination that suggested a level of networked command the Council had not seen in centuries. Every human captain seemed to know exactly what every other captain was doing. The corvette Sentinel's pride exploded first, its reactor breached by a lucky shot from 3 human destroyers firing in perfect synchronization. Then the frigate Morningstar lost power, disabled by some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapon that overloaded its systems. More ships fell, damaged or destroyed, while the 7th Fleet struggled to adapt to tactics that made no sense by their standards. Admiral Zorath watched his fleet being torn apart, and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. These were not primitives. These were not easy targets. These were warriors who fought with a desperation and creativity that suggested they had been preparing for this moment for years. "Retreat," he finally ordered, the word bitter in his mouth. "All ships fall back to emergency jump coordinates. We retreat." The 7th Fleet fled from Sol System 12 days after arriving. They had lost 9 ships destroyed and 17 more damaged. Over 3,000 Carillion warriors dead. And they had not captured a single human colony. Had not even reached Earth orbit. Behind them, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the alien vessels vanish into faster-than-light travel. She felt no triumph, only grim satisfaction. Humanity had won the first battle, but she knew this war was far from over. What the Galactic Council did not understand, what they could not understand, was that humans had been watching them for 43 years. Every diplomatic message had been analyzed. Every council ship that passed near Sol System had been tracked and studied. Humanity had known this day would come, and they had prepared for it in the only way humans knew how: by refusing to give up, by adapting, by turning every disadvantage into a weapon. The Council wanted to teach humanity a lesson about respecting authority. Instead, they were about to learn a lesson about the most dangerous trait humanity possessed: the absolute refusal to surrender when their survival was threatened. The awakening and the reckoning. The emergency council session convened 18 hours after Admiral Zorath's defeated fleet limped back to the nearest council station. The vast chamber that usually hummed with orderly debate now crackled with chaos. Representatives from 932 civilizations shouted, clicked, buzzed, and broadcast their outrage simultaneously. The translation system struggled to keep up with the volume of communication. High Chancellor Meridax appeared at her elevated position, her light form pulsing with unusual intensity that indicated distress. "Order," she commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. "We will have order." Gradually, the chamber quieted. But the tension remained thick enough to be physical. Every representative had received the same reports. The 7th Fleet, one of the Council's most powerful military forces, had been defeated by a Level 2 civilization using primitive technology. It should have been impossible. Yet it had happened. Ambassador Drexen stood at the central platform, but his usual confident bearing had crumbled. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides, and his obsidian skin seemed somehow duller. The holographic display above him showed footage from the battle, captured by the 7th Fleet's sensors. Human ships swarmed like insects, attacking from impossible angles, using tactics that no civilized military employed. "They were waiting for us," Drexen said, his voice hollow. "Everything we believed about humanity was wrong. They knew we were coming. They prepared. They studied our ships, our weapons, our tactics. While we thought them primitive and ignorant, they were learning everything about us." Admiral Zorath stood in the military section, his scarred hide bearing fresh medical patches where shrapnel had penetrated during the battle. His pride was wounded far worse than his body. "I have commanded fleets for 60 years, he said, and his voice carried shame as well as anger. "I have conquered 43 systems for the Council. I have never retreated from battle. But these humans fought with a ferocity I have never encountered. They sacrificed ships without hesitation. They used weapons we did not know they possessed. They coordinated in ways our sensors could not properly track. We were not defeated by inferior technology. We were defeated by superior tactics and absolute determination." "Impossible," shouted Representative Quillix. "They are primitives! They have no shield technology, no quantum networks, no military academies or strategic doctrine." Observer Talent rose slowly from his section. He had remained silent during the previous session's vote, his warnings ignored. Now everyone turned to listen. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "that is exactly why they won. We assumed our superior technology guaranteed victory. We assumed our established military doctrine was unbeatable. We assumed primitives could not threaten us. Humanity made no such assumptions. They studied us as if their survival depended on it, because it did." He activated his own display, showing human historical records he had spent years compiling. "Look at their history. In one of their global conflicts, their Second World War, they fought for 6 of their years. Over 70 million humans died. They developed weapons of incredible destructive power, then used them twice, then chose never to use them again. What species does that? What level of discipline and collective restraint does that require? The display changed to show other human conflicts. Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, the resource wars, the unification campaigns. Hundreds of conflicts, large and small, spanning thousands of years. And in every single one, humans had learned, adapted, and developed new ways to fight. They have been at war with themselves longer than most of our species have had written language. Talent continued. They have studied warfare the way we study physics or philosophy. It is woven into their culture, their literature, their games, their very psychology. When we sent the 7th Fleet, we did not attack a primitive civilization. We attacked a species that has been preparing for war since before they could properly record their own history. Senator Vorheim's crystalline body refracted light in patterns suggesting fear. Then what do? If a single fleet cannot defeat them, if they truly are as dangerous as you suggest, do we commit more forces? Do we assemble an armada large enough to overwhelm them through sheer numbers? And risk how many more council lives? Talent replied. Risk how many more ships? Because make no mistake, even if we eventually won through overwhelming force, the cost would be staggering. And that is assuming humanity fights a conventional war. I have studied their concepts. They have terms for different types of conflict. Guerrilla warfare, asymmetric warfare, totalva. If we truly threaten their existence, what will they become? High Chancellor Meridax pulsed thoughtfully. Then you suggest we simply allow them to continue violating our laws? Allow them to expand without restriction? Set a precedent that the Council's authority is meaningless? I suggest, Talent said carefully, that we reconsider our approach entirely. We treated humanity as children who needed to be disciplined. Perhaps we should have treated them as adults who needed to be understood. Before anyone could respond, the Chamber's emergency communication system activated. An urgent message for the Council from Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Force. She requests immediate communication. The Chamber fell silent. Then High Chancellor Meridax spoke. Accept the communication. The holographic display flickered and changed, showing the same human admiral who had faced Zorath. But she was not on her ship this time. The background showed what appeared to be a massive space station, new and still under construction, with human workers visible through observation windows. Chen stood in what looked like a command center, surrounded by other human officers and advisors. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Chen began, and her voice held no triumph, only tired determination. I am Admiral Sarah Chen, Supreme Commander of the United Earth Space Force. I speak for the unified government of Earth and all human colonies. She paused, and the camera view expanded to show more of the station. The scale became apparent. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and docked ships. Construction had obviously been underway for years. 43 years ago, Chen continued, Earth received its first transmission from the Galactic Council. Your message informed us that we were in violation of laws we never agreed to follow, that we must cease our expansion and await your permission to exist beyond our homeworld. You declared our territory to be under your jurisdiction without asking our consent. You treated us not as fellow civilized beings, but as children or criminals. Her expression hardened. We responded with every diplomatic courtesy our culture knows. We asked for dialogue. We requested formal meetings. We sought to establish mutual understanding. Every message was ignored or answered with demands for our immediate submission. You never asked what we wanted. You never inquired about our needs or our nature. You simply assumed you had the right to control us, and so we prepared. While you watched us with your sensors and made your assessments of our primitive technology, we studied you. We observed your ships. We analyzed your broadcast. We learned your languages, your customs, your military doctrine. We spent 43 years getting ready for the day you would decide we were a problem that needed to be solved. The display behind Chen changed to show more images. Human shipyards throughout the Sol system. Massive construction efforts on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. Training facilities where thousands of human soldiers practiced combat in zero gravity. The scale of preparation was staggering. We did not want this war, Chen said, and genuine regret colored her voice. We wanted to reach the stars, to explore, to learn, to grow as a species. We wanted to eventually join your council as equals, to share knowledge and culture. But you made it clear that you would only accept us as subjects, as primitives to be controlled and corrected. Ambassador Drexen found his voice. You violated our laws. You established colonies in restricted space. You refuse to acknowledge council authority. Because your laws were imposed without consent, Chen replied sharply. Because your restricted space included systems we needed for our survival. Because acknowledging your authority would mean surrendering our sovereignty, our freedom to determine our own destiny. Tell me, Ambassador, when did the Galactic Council earn the right to rule over species that never asked for your governance? The question hung in the chamber like a physical weight. It was something no one had considered before. The Council's authority had existed for so long that its legitimacy was simply assumed. Species either joined voluntarily or were brought into compliance forcibly. But here was humanity, questioning the fundamental premise of galactic order. High Chancellor Meridax spoke carefully. What is it you want, Admiral Chen? Do you seek to wage war against the entire Council? Do you believe Earth can stand alone against 932 civilizations? Chen shook her head. We want what any species wants: respect, autonomy, and the freedom to exist on our own terms. We do not seek to conquer anyone. We do not desire war, but we will not submit. We will not be occupied. We will not allow anyone, Council or otherwise, to dictate the terms of our existence. She gestured and new images appeared. Human diplomats in formal attire, architectural designs for embassies and meeting facilities, trade proposals and cultural exchange programs. We are prepared to negotiate. We will discuss boundaries, share information about resource claims, establish proper communication protocols. We will behave as responsible neighbors in this galaxy, but we will do so as equals, not as subjects. The chamber erupted again. Some representatives shouted their acceptance of Chen's terms. Others demanded renewed military action. Still others simply sat in stunned silence, processing this fundamental challenge to everything the Council represented. Admiral Zorath stood, and his voice cut through the chaos. I have fought for the Council my entire adult life. I have shed blood for the principles of galactic order, but I will not lead another fleet against Earth. Not because I fear defeat, though I respect these humans as warriors, but because this human is right. We never asked them what they wanted. We simply assumed the right to control them. And our assumption cost 3,000 Council lives. The debate raged for 14 more hours. Hardliners demanded total war, the commitment of enough military force to overwhelm Earth through sheer numbers. Moderates suggested continued diplomatic pressure and economic sanctions. Pragmatists pointed out that even if the Council won such a war, the cost would be catastrophic, and occupying a hostile human population might prove impossible. Observer Talent presented the results of his research, showing that of the 47 species the Council had forcibly integrated in the past 1,000 years, 17 had required ongoing military presence to maintain compliance, draining resources and creating resentment that occasionally erupted into violence. Did the Council really want to add humanity to that list? A species that had already demonstrated their willingness and ability to fight? Finally, after hours of debate, High Chancellor Meridax called for a vote. 3 options were presented. Continue military operations against Earth, accept human terms for negotiation, or maintain the status quo, neither attacking nor formally recognizing humanity's sovereignty. The vote took 3 hours to complete. When the results were displayed, the chamber fell silent. 487 members voted to accept negotiations. 312 voted to maintain the status quo. Only 133 voted for continued military action. High Chancellor Meridax made it official. Admiral Chen, the Galactic Council accepts your proposal for negotiations. We will establish a neutral meeting location and begin formal diplomatic discussions. We cannot promise those discussions will result in complete acceptance of your terms, but we acknowledge that our previous approach was flawed. Chen nodded, and for the first time her stern expression softened slightly. Thank you, High Chancellor. We look forward to productive negotiations, but be aware, we will not compromise on our fundamental sovereignty. We are willing to be partners, neighbors, even friends, but we will never be subjects. The transmission ended. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, representatives slowly filed out, processing what had just occurred. The Council had existed for 12,000 years, maintaining order through a combination of diplomatic integration and military force. But today, for the first time in living memory, it had been forced to recognize the limits of its power. Ambassador Drexen remained at the central platform long after most representatives had departed. Observer Talent approached him slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. You tried to warn us, Drexen said without looking at the observer. I dismissed your concerns as abstractions. I thought technology and military power were all that mattered. Talent stood beside him, both watching the now empty holographic display where Earth had been shown. Every species teaches us something if we are wise enough to listen. Humanity has taught us that advancement is not measured only in technology. Sometimes the most dangerous civilizations are not those with the best weapons, but those with the strongest will to survive. What do you think will come of these negotiations? Drexen asked. Talent considered the question carefully. I think humanity will eventually join the Council, but on their own terms. I think they will change us more than we change them. And I think perhaps that is exactly what the Council needs. We have been comfortable for too long, too certain of our superiority. Humanity has reminded us that the universe is full of surprises, and arrogance is the fastest path to defeat. Over the following months, negotiations between Earth and the Galactic Council proceeded slowly but steadily. Humans proved to be skilled diplomats, though their style was more direct than the Council was accustomed to. They asked uncomfortable questions, challenged ancient assumptions, and refused to accept precedent as justification for policy. Boundaries were established, with humanity agreeing to respect certain zones while the Council acknowledged human claims to 31 systems. Trade agreements were drafted, cultural exchange programs proposed, and a framework for future human participation in Council affairs was outlined. It would take years before humanity achieved full Council membership, but the path forward was clear. More importantly, the Council itself began to change. Other species that had been forcibly integrated, seeing humanity's success in demanding respect, began to question their own status. Some requested renegotiation of their membership terms. Others simply became more assertive in Council debates, less willing to automatically defer to older, more powerful civilizations. The Galactic Council had voted to invade Earth, expecting a quick police action that would establish their authority and maintain galactic order. Instead, they had encountered a species that refused to be intimidated, that turned disadvantages into advantages, and that fought with a combination of innovation and determination that no established military doctrine could overcome. In trying to discipline humanity, the Council had instead been forced to confront its own complacency, its own assumptions about power and authority. The galaxy would never be quite the same again. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of humanity's Reach, the station that had become the symbol of human determination. Through the windows, Earth glowed blue and green, beautiful and fragile. She had fought to protect that world, and she would fight again if necessary. But for now, there was hope that fighting might not be required. A young officer approached, saluting smartly. Admiral, the first Council diplomatic vessel has arrived. Ambassador Talent requests permission to come aboard. Chen smiled slightly. Grant permission. And prepare our formal reception. Let's show the Council that humans know how to be gracious hosts as well as determined warriors. As the officer departed to carry out her orders, Chen looked back at Earth. Humanity had taken its first real steps onto the galactic stage, and they had done so not as subjects or primitives, but as equals. The road ahead would be challenging, but humans had never shied away from challenges. The Galactic Council had learned a hard lesson about underestimating humanity. But perhaps the most important lesson was still to come, that the best partnerships were not built on dominance and submission, but on mutual respect between equals. Humanity would teach the Council that lesson, one negotiation at a time. And if the Council ever forgot, if they ever again tried to impose their will on Earth, humanity would be ready. Because that was what humans did best. They prepared, they adapted, and they never, ever gave up. The galaxy had gained a new power, one that would reshape the very meaning of civilization and authority. And it all began when the Council voted to invade Earth expecting an easy victory, and instead discovered that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their numbers, but their absolute refusal to accept defeat.